Michael said, Kobe, I'm not using my guy anymore. Why don't you give him a call? Kobe says, well, tell me about Grover. He goes, man, Grover really, really knows his stuff. But he goes, but he's the biggest asshole you will ever meet. One of the nicest things Michael's ever said to me, because he didn't call me a asshole, he called me the asshole. If you're gonna strive for something, never strive to be A. A is a part of a group, the you stand out. Tim Grover, company's Attack Athletics, title is Sports Enhancement Specialist. Kobe Bryant's trainer from 2007 to 2012. I've always admired Kobe when I was training Michael. Everyone said he's the next one, so I've always kind of watched him saw him coming in and out of the United Center and so forth. But in 2007, he actually called Michael and said, hey, listen, my knees are absolutely killing me. Because Kobe had came into the league when he was 17, so he had a lot of miles on his legs already. People forget about that he came in at such a young age and was playing at a very young age. So he goes, you think you can help me out? I said, I don't think I can help you out. I know I can help you out. He goes, I'll see you tomorrow. Once I got the medical history, I talked to a bunch of individuals that had been doing work with Kobe, kind of getting what his regimen was, what he was doing, how often he'd work out. So once I got the resources put together, I flew out to LA, sat down with him. We started to go through the regimen, and the problem with his knees were he was basically doing too much. This is a common problem that's happened now. You have so many experts involved. You have your trainer, you have your massage therapist, you have your muscle activation guy. Everybody's pulling everybody in all these different directions because everybody wants the credit for the client. You got to get everybody on the same page. If I need an individual to shorten a certain group of muscles or leave them alone and lengthen others, and then you're seeing something and you're doing the complete opposite, it's never going to benefit the athlete. So when I came in, I told Kobe, I said, if I'm going to do this, I have to be the person in charge. I said, you can continue to work with everybody, but I said, I have to be in charge. I have to know everything that's happening. And then once we got everybody on the same page, we actually decreased the amount of workload he was doing. And because Kobe is another one of the persons that his biggest obsession was to have more championships than Michael. You know, if you were to ask him when he was going to retire, he would say after number 7. He didn't say, he never bought it in years because Michael had won 6, so his goal was 7. One of the biggest differences between the two is Michael always knew when it was enough and he would listen to you. You know, if you told him that's it, that's it. With Kobe, to him, that's it meant that's it for that moment, but 3 hours later, I can start back up again. And he never really got out of that mentality, which I don't blame him because that's what made him successful. It's hard to understand that sometimes you need to do less to get more. So I get everybody in the room, we pool all the information together, and I don't come in and say, I'm right. Let's everybody understand what's going on and figure out how to cure this ailment. Just like basketball is a team sport, getting an individual healthy is a team sport. When I started with Kobe, what did I have to do? We had to rebuild the whole foundation again. We had this super athlete who had all the beautiful things, had the expensive kitchen, had all the great appliances, had the cars, but the foundation of the house wasn't taken care of. And what is foundation? Foundation is solid cement, it's solid brick. You build a foundation by lifting weights. The fastest, quickest way to get an athlete stronger is through moving metal. How can you have a sport now where you have so much more technology, you have so much more resources, less contact, and more injuries? It's mind-boggling to me. It's because everything is rubber band, everything is resistance, everything is cable. There's teams now in the NBA that don't even have a weight room. You still have to move iron. It's the one greatest form of injury prevention because you do a compound movement, it sends the muscles and the electric stimulus that goes into the body that cannot be duplicated by cables. It cannot be duplicated by body work. It cannot be duplicated by medicine balls. And there's all the studies that are out there to prove it. But everyone gets back into sports specific. It doesn't look good. All right, it's too simplistic. It is very simplistic, but you're building the foundation. And this is nothing new. This goes back to when they built the pyramids. If you start adding pulleys and cables, it's not true resistance. When you play basketball, you play football, you play baseball, you play soccer, whatever you play, when you get hit, when you jump, when you land, there's no pulleys, there's no cables. Your body weight is the metal. You have to learn how to explode with it, and you also need to learn how to land with it and how to stop it. And that's what metal does. It teaches you to lift it, but it also teaches you to put it down. Accelerate and decelerate. With Kobe, everything was acceleration. He had a Ferrari and a Lamborghini acceleration, and he had a subcar performance brakes in it. You know, everyone talks about, well, how fast can a person go from one end to the court to the other? Well, I want to know how quickly a person can go from one end to the other and stop on a certain particular point. I need you to be able to decelerate. So what he had a major imbalance between the muscles that accelerated and the muscles that decelerated. And that was causing the issues on his knees. So what we had to do was, for all your years, you've been shortening muscles because that's what most training does. It's a contraction of a muscle. So we put a whole new regimen into his program where everything was lengthening of the muscle, to lengthen, lengthen, lengthen. So there's 3 types of contractions that you have. You have the isometric contraction, which is static, where the contraction doesn't move. You have the concentric contraction, which is a shortening of the muscle, and you have the eccentric contraction, which is a lengthening of the muscle. We totally took the concentric phase out of his training, totally. Very difficult to do because the way to overload a muscle through an eccentric phase, you're stronger on a lengthening of a muscle than you are on a shortening of a muscle. Let's take a simple leg press movement. Most people, when they do it, you have the weight set up and you push out and you bring the weight back. I wouldn't allow him to push out. We would literally have 2 or 3 of us. We would push the weight out, have him place his feet on there, and just have him come bring the weight back slowly. We were able to create more of a space in between his knees, so there was less friction there. So if you had less friction, the chondromalacia and the tendonitis and all the stuff that was happening on his knees was starting to get alleviated. We were able to identify all that with the rest of his team, and everybody started to work on concentrating on lengthening everything. And lengthening is so much more painful than shortening. But the one thing you know about Kobe, this guy's pain tolerance was off the charts. People always say, you should have posted more of Kobe's workouts on social media. I said, if I posted Kobe's workouts on social media, we'd literally be posting something 4 times a day. That's how focused he was in his pursuit of excellence, his pursuit of championships. Kobe was like, everyone said you won the championships because of Shaq. But when Shaq was traded to Miami, Kobe wanted to prove that he could win not one championship, he could win multiple championships without Shaq. And that's when I was there. Kobe wanted that pressure, so he knew he had to become more effective. He had to get his teammates involved. Kobe was as hard on his teammates as Michael was. He was just as hard and as competitive in practice. Everybody watched films of the current players. Kobe would tell these guys to get film of players going way back. Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, Pete Maravich. He goes, I want to see what those guys did to be successful. A lot of people don't know this, is Kobe knew 4 or 5 languages very fluently. I'm talking about fluently. Obviously, English, Italian, Spanish, and I know he had started working on like Mandarin. I mean, those aren't easy languages. I mean, I'm talking about fluent, like he could have a conversation with individuals in those languages. Pau Gasol was one of his teammates, the Spaniard. So they would communicate on the court in Spanish so the other team wouldn't know what they were talking about. And the reason he ended up learning Mandarin so well is because he saw the explosion in China basketball before everybody else did. So he goes, how can I endear myself to this culture even more? Says, yeah, okay, a lot of players just go over there, but what if I can give a press conference in their language? You know, the greats, they show up early, they stay late. There's times where you'll see Kobe and the athletic trainer throw a towel over the finger, yank it back, and go right back in the game because Kobe doesn't want to miss that time. Same thing with his shoulder. When he's at a dislocated shoulder, you pop it right back into place. The last play when he tore his Achilles. Every other player in the league, you'd have had your teammates carrying you off. He not only gets up, walks to the free throw line, makes 2 free throws, then goes over to the bench and asks if you can pull it and tape it down so I can finish the game. It was the start of the USA Basketball Olympic training in Vegas. We had just stopped training because the season had just ended and the Olympics were coming up. And he goes, I want to implement cycling in my training. I'm like, all right. So I'm thinking stationary biking, you know, in a health club or something. He goes, no, I want to incorporate cycling. So I said, all right, so we're getting to Vegas. So I'm like, okay, so I'm looking at all the different paths that we can go to. So, because I knew I'm going to have to get on the bike with him. There's going to be security, there's going to be myself, there'll be a Nike rep, and there'll be Kobe on the bike. So I got to figure out a path. I'm thinking about basketball, change of speed, slow stop. So I got to find the right hills that go up and down. I got to know the path of when he's going to accelerate and decelerate. I didn't know anything about Vegas. So talking to different people, talking to the concierge at the hotel, talking to the different rental car companies and say, what are the best roads to go for, where the desert is? Then I'm like, okay, where am I going to get 4 bicycles in the next 48 hours that are going to fit individuals from 6'5", 6'6", all the way down to somebody who's 5'8". So I had Nike get in touch with some people on their cycling team, and they said, okay, then they made arrangements to have bikes sent to the hotel. Miscalculated something. I forgot to tell them to put the bikes together. So the night before, myself and the rest of Kobe's staff were literally putting the bikes together. Because what time's the ride? 4:30 in the morning. He wants to be out there before the sun comes up, and then he wants to take a break and ride back when the sun's at its peak. If I'm going to do this, I want to be in the most uncomfortable temperature environment out there. If you're going to ride, you're going to ride. A couple of players had heard about this, and the next day they were like, yeah, we want to go with you. I was like, no, you don't. He said, you do not want to go. And that was part of his regimen while we were in Vegas the whole time. Every other day we went on these rides. When you have those clients that are that obsessed with getting better, they're just not doing something just to be doing it. They're not going on a bike ride just to go on a bike ride. There's a purpose behind it. And you have to have a plan with that purpose. You just had to be a little creative, and you had to be able to have a client that trusted in your abilities enough to say, hey, this is going to work. So Mike Procopio, who worked with me, he's one of the best basketball minds I have ever met. He would break down film to like the microsecond. He would be like, okay, he's playing, any particular opponent. He goes, this person has a tendency for their performance to drop off after 6 minutes. So that would allow me to set the training program up so Kobe would start to peak at when this guy was coming down so he could take advantage of that 2-minute time in there. I could incorporate it into Kobe's training where without even having to think about it, he would automatically know that I see this player starting to lag a little bit, and all of a sudden, this is when he would start taking off. There's certain training methods that you can do where you can maximize a person's oxygen capacity. So you can deprive oxygen to a certain point. And this was way before, when people had the masks, they had the training masks. I used to have individuals sprint back and forth with snorkels in their mouth. You can't get as much oxygen through a snorkel. And then during the time where you needed the most, take the snorkel off, more oxygen, more red blood cells are recruited. And now all of a sudden you have that burst of energy. You can't always train in altitude, but there's a way of creating the same effect. People always think, I lack the tools. You don't lack the tools, you lack the creativity. There's a great story about him. At age 17, he gets drafted. And people know that when you get drafted in whatever sport, somebody usually throws this big draft party for you. Kobe gets drafted, no draft party, no celebration. He goes, works out. He goes to the gym and works out after he got drafted. He did his little interviews and so forth, go to the gym. Kobe was always fascinated with animals that were like known to be aggressive, and a snake and the mentality of the venom. The things people feared were more of allies to him. The mama mentality is the black mama, which is the most dangerous snake out there. So he's not like, he's not going to think of a garden snake. If he's going to put a mentality together, it's going to be with the most venomous, most dangerous individual out there. The one thing about him I learned, he was so gracious to the young guys coming into the league. And a lot of people don't know that about Kobe. He would talk to them. He would give them answers that they just weren't ready for. They didn't have that mama mentality at that age. And some of them never had it. But he was trying to tell them, if you understand this now, it's the difference between an 8-year career and a 15-year career. These guys, they set their records to be broken. They want to see the next generation excel. They want to see the next generation get better. I have an expression, I have a saying that when you shake the commissioner's hand, congratulations, that's the end of your career. It's not the beginning of your career. That's the end of your career. Because now you finally exhale. You're like, oh, man, all those AAU teams, all the high schools, now college, some college, I made it. Okay, and those are the individuals that have the shortest careers. The ones that are like, I'm here now, what's next? And to see a 17-year-old to have the mentality to say, no draft party for me. I'm gonna go work out. That was the black mama.